Hi everyone, and welcome to the 2020 Design Live presentation workshop. My name is Vanessa DeKukuk. I am the Global Training Manager here at 2020, and I'm so glad that you take a few minutes out of your day to learn a few new tips and tricks. Before I joined the team at 2020, I was also a kitchen designer, and I was always looking for different ways to get faster, get better, make sure that my designs were super accurate. So we're going to look at a couple of those techniques today. We have a lot of different courses available that talk a lot about these techniques. So if you caught the basics workshop a little bit earlier, that's an example of some of the things we talk about in our level 101 class. If you caught the advanced workshop, that's an example of some of the things that we talk about in our 201 class. And a lot of the items I'm going to refer to today and show are examples of things in our brand new class called Picture Perfect. If you have any questions about our training classes, you can just jump out to our website, 2020spaces.com/training. Initially, I'd like to talk about the rendering mode that you have set in 2020. Let's see if we can make that a little bit easier to work with. So as many of you know, when you're in a project and you go to pull up a perspective view, it often will initially show up in kind of a quick hidden line view and then turn into a color view. Now, sometimes when I'm working on a project, I might not be ready to show it in color or what we call texture. And so I don't always want to wait for that texture view to finish. So let's change one of our preferences to speed this up a little bit. I'm going to close the rendering window, and under the File menu, look for Preferences. In Preferences, don't be overwhelmed. There's a lot of things in here. We're just going to look under the rendering setting and simply change our mode to default to hidden. Okay, what this is going to allow you to do is quickly be able to pull up any perspective view in a quick line drawing, but only pull up a texture view when you're ready for it. So a lot of times when I'm working, I just want a quick preview of the space. I want to look at the door alignment. I want to make sure the appliance is placed correctly. And then later when we go to meet with our client, we can always change that to texture and show them what it looks like in color. But it usually takes just a couple more seconds, even though I'm using Easy Render in version 12.5. It's fairly quick, but it just saves a little bit of time to be able to pull that up in a hidden line first. Another tip, and this is a small one, but again, it can make a big difference. A lot of times when I'm working with a client, or if I'm getting ready to present or save this image in a large format, I like to see it the whole size of my screen. However, the bigger this screen is, the longer it will take to render, even if it's just a couple seconds. Sometimes I just want to work really fast. So I usually don't put this full screen unless I'm doing a really high quality rendering. Most days I will keep this fairly small, and the smaller that is, the faster it will render. Okay, next up, let's see how I actually set up that perspective or look at some easy ways to align our camera easily. So initially when I pulled up that perspective, it was a great view. I could see pretty much everything in the space that I needed to, but I did set that up ahead of time. So here's our space in a final high quality rendering, and with this example, it was created with the rule of thirds. So if we were to break this down and look at the picture in segments of 3, you'll see a lot of consistency and just a lot of balance to our eye when we're looking at this, even though this front view or perspective view is pretty asymmetrical. Notice how at the island that aligns perfectly with this bottom line, and our vertical lines kind of align with other large visual things in our space, whether that be the appliance wall, the cabinetry, or the window. Setting up this view is actually really easy in 2020. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually turn on the camera. Down in the bottom right hand corner of the screen, there's a really small icon, the very last one in the list, that turns the camera icon on. Here's where my camera was sitting. Now sometimes it feels like that camera is in the neighbor's yard or in the next room over, and that's okay. Just imagine that's where you're kind of standing with the camera. So we can move and adjust that camera wherever we want. If I move it here, let's say this opening is where I really want to focus, then I can adjust the camera easily. If you have a hard time moving this, definitely take a second to zoom in. When you zoom in, it's much easier to see that this is straight on in that view. Now, zooming back out, let's center this a little bit, and there's a couple things I want to consider. First of all, where I'm standing is great. I'm kind of stepped back a little bit away from the space just to be able to know that I can see like the tops of the cabinets as well as the bottom of the cabinets. And there's also another line here that this is kind of like a cutting line where do I want to see, let's say, if I move back a little bit, the walls coming in from the opposing space, I want to make sure that it's within this V or this view. If I bring this line forward, I will never see that doorway or the walls as they're coming in, let's say from the living room. So you get to kind of choose how far away you want all of these things. The other thing that's really important is I can right click and I can set up things like camera height and camera tilt. Now the height, I usually will go one of two ways. Either think about the height as the eye level of my client, what would they commonly see, kind of from the floor up, or if I'm looking at a particular item, especially if it's like below the countertop, let's say focusing on the dishwasher or a drawer or something on the island, I might bring that height down a bit just so that way I'm not tilting too much across there. Then also within the tilt, camera tilt is how far are you looking up or looking down. Sometimes that can be done very nice, but a lot of times it can look a little crooked. And here's what I mean. Let's go ahead and see what the perspective looks like right now. I'm going to make this just a little bit bigger so we can see it. So notice I've stepped back far enough that I can really see kind of everything from floor to ceiling. Plus, at the moment, I don't have any tilt either up or down, which means I've got some nice vertical lines. That's another really common architectural photography term out there called converging lines. Sometimes when this is tilted a lot, you get very crooked lines along the edge of the screen. Now I'm doing this and kind of exaggerating these lines quite a bit, but sometimes it's hard to manipulate that or get it just right when you're in this perspective screen versus setting it up out here with the camera. I know as soon as I pop into that perspective, it should be nice and straight. The other thing I might consider at this point is to save myself some time by saving these views. Now, I'm not going to necessarily save this image so that I'm using it outside of 2020 yet, but instead I'm saving the camera view because I might like to get to this view very quickly if I'm in a live presentation with my client or just simply knowing I want to present this view later. So in the bottom right hand corner, there's a small white box. We can come down and say, I would like this to be, the front line view. I can hit enter or save view, and now that's saved. I can set up a number of views and they can be accessed either through the presentation area. Notice as I look through here, I have a few different ones. So if I go to all hidden line, all was kind of that initial view that we started with. So even though my camera is kind of initially looking through that opening into the space, this was the all where I can kind of see the perimeter walls really well. And I can also hit the drop down here right within the rendering window to find all of my other views. So here's my front line view that we just saved. Those saved also in the rendering mode that you set them up in. So if you want them in color, and if I had it in texture, notice I also have an all in color view as well. Just imagine how much time you'll save kind of playing with it or adjusting it, especially if you're in a live presentation with a client. I just want those really easy to access right here through the presentation tab or in my actual perspective window. Now, last trick, sometimes I don't use the camera at all. Let's zoom in and look at some of the things that are already built into our project. For example, right now, if I zoom in nice and close, you can see this dashed line in front of any of my perimeter walls, even in front of my island. And this area here is a placement zone. Normally, we trust the placement zone to take our item and make sure that it's placed very consistently and accurately against the wall. But I'm also going to use the placement zone for other things too. If I click on this placement zone and I go to front view, so this is a little different than perspective. A front view is a lot more like an elevation. Now that I have this front view, kind of same rules apply as my perspective. I can set this up to look at it in hidden line or texture. I can also zoom in. There is a little trick. You'll just need to hit the orbit button and you can zoom in or manipulate this view a little bit if you'd like to. And then also I could save this view if I know I want to come back to it again later. Notice the biggest difference between this and an actual elevation is it's a little cleaner in that it doesn't have a bunch of dimensions or other things annotating maybe installation notes and things. This is really just for the visual. So maybe we'll just call this sink wall and save it. So just imagine how nice this would be to be able to highlight the island. Especially in this view, it would be really hard to get the camera in and just right. So I'm going to pick the placement zone in front of the island, look for the front view, and then same rule applies. I can see it, I can change it to color if I need to, or simply save it. Now I'm sure you noticed there were already a lot of textures applied in our design today, but let me show you a couple tips on things to look for, how to add these textures into your designs as well. A good example of a texture is going to be something like what you see on your floor, maybe a really cool design on your wall, but most commonly the one question we get all the time is how to find great textures to show for backsplashes. If I go back to our texture view, remember there's a really cool tile along the perimeter wall in this example. Now, the number one technique when you are trying to apply your own texture is find that texture, and if you can, find it from your vendor. Okay? If you've never done this before, we do have a recommendation. You'll notice that if you go up to the help menu at the top, you can jump out to the Knowledge Center. And there's actually an article about this. So if I come out here and I just type in backsplash, here's an article that talks about finding tileable and seamless textures. Those are two really key words. Whenever you have a nice texture that can tile or repeat consistently, as well as being seamless so you don't see any lines, those are great to use in the software. There's a little description here out on the Knowledge Center and then also a few links. So if I come out, Tilebar is a great example. If you've never used them before, you can search their website pretty easily and find really nice images. But I have another trick for you too, and I'm actually going to use the design that we have today. So let me go ahead and let's take a look at the elevation of one of the walls. You can see this yellow area was drawn with the surface tool. If you've never used the surface tool, you can jump out to the Knowledge Center and just type in surface. But if I go ahead and look closer at that surface, let's see what has been added. Under variables, you can see the display texture. When I click on this little color image, that will open up. And here is the example of the tile that was brought in. Now, how can I find maybe a tile like that or a tile similar? A lot of times your clients are supplying you with inspirational photos. Maybe you have a photo of something or something close to what you're looking for. But I'm going to cheat a little bit. Let's use this exact tile. And let's use some of the newer technology that's out there. If you haven't tried to Google image search something, it's really handy, but also in the latest version of Windows, there is a visual search built right in. All you need to do is go to the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. There's a little white box that says type here to search. And when you open that up, you have all these different shortcuts, but look in the very bottom right-hand corner, there's an icon that kind of looks like a camera. When I click on that, it's called Search with Screenshot. So I can literally just screenshot that example, our little tile, and it's going to go and do the work for me. It's searching out on the web for anything that looks like that or anything that's similar to it. So cool. So I can scroll through and find different web pages. Sometimes it's Pinterest, sometimes it's Houzz, sometimes it's actually the vendor, and it's things that are very, very close. There's also pages that I can get to here and related content, which sometimes this is similar items, or again, you kind of see the same theme. So if you're ever really stuck trying to find a really good image, try out some of these different search capabilities that are built right into our tools. It's amazing. Now let me jump back into the design. And the other tool that's in here that's super handy, when you do bring in your own image, and just a hint to bring in your own, you just go to Use Your Texture Library and hit the little plus mark on the folder, and you can bring in any image you want. But once it's brought in, notice that you can kind of test it out before you even look at it in the design. In the upper right-hand corner of that screen, there is an icon or a button called texture tiling. And what that does is it shows you a preview of how well that example can tile. So this one looks really great. There's some nice grout lines that makes it super easy to tile, but also repeats really consistently. So before I've even put it in the plan, I can really get a good idea of what it's going to look like. Pretty handy. Okay, in our last few minutes, we need to really complete the presentation. So I'm just going to say okay to this. I'm going to close this window. We've actually done most of the work already. We've got the design done. We've saved a number of views. So really, I can present this quite quickly. What I'm going to do is go up to presentation and take a look at the drawing layout option. With drawing layout, we have a number of templates that are preset. Just how do you want to divide out your page? How many images would you like to include in here? I'm going to focus on images right now, and let's start with 2, for example. When I say OK, this basically converts our project over to the presentation view only. Now, one thing, I did go into my print setup already, and when I went to print, you'll notice in the page setup, you can set it to show a title block or a logo if you'd like. I've turned some of that off just to maximize the screen space right now. And in each one of these windows, if I right click, notice how quickly I can just jump out to named views and pick one of those camera views that I already set up. So let's say that we want the all hidden line. Say OK. And then same thing for the lower window, I will look for a named view and we can use the all in color. Perfect. Imagine this as like the cover page or the initial thing you show to your client so they can really start understanding what's happening in that space. We can customize it further by going to annotations, adding notes, really making this unique to them, but saving time all along. Because if I go back to my project, and let's say that the client decided that they actually needed 4 stools instead of just 3. So I'll copy that stool, add it in at the end here, and simply go back to my drawing layout. Now when you first look at this, it does just have the 3 stools, but I can simply refresh the image. So imagine so many changes can happen throughout the design process, but I don't want to have to recreate the same exact presentation 100 different ways. Lastly, if you want to share this via PDF, because so many of us are doing online meetings today, keep in mind that you could print this to PDF just by going up to File and Print. And I already have my default printer set up as the Microsoft Print to PDF. If it's not the same on yours, you can uncheck this box to be able to go back in and change your printer. In this case, I just have that one page, so I could do the current work area, or we could do a selection if we have multiple pages. Keep in mind they will print separately, so the last thing I'll probably do is merge them together. I already have this one printed out, so I'm just going to go out to the web and go to a site called ilovepdf.com. There's actually a lot of sites that do this, but what I'm looking for is a way to merge multiple PDFs together. Notice the very first option is Merge PDF. So what I've done is behind the scenes, I have already printed the presentation, plus I might have like a Word document or another type of document that I like to do my final presentation with. So if I have a few PDFs, all I need to do is select them and this will help me merge them together. So let's just go to the folder that they both are, and I have kind of a welcome sheet as well as my drawing layout that was previously saved. I can put these in any order that I'd like, and then when I merge them together, I can save them as a specific name so I know exactly what is within this PDF. The default name is something like I love PDF merged, and then a bunch of numbers. Now this example, I actually just used a template that came right with Microsoft Word. So of course you'd customize this with your logo, with your information, and then notice that as it goes a little bit further down into page 3, now I have my presentation from 2020. So if you can imagine, there's no limit into what this package could include. Maybe you have very detailed instructions if the client is a little bit more in the DIY end of things. Maybe you have details about the lead times that we're currently facing. You can include anything you need about your company, about your process, and of course about the client's project, so that way your design package really stands out in the case that they are getting quotes from other dealers. So our time today flew by so quickly. If you have the opportunity, I definitely recommend checking out some of our training classes. Like I mentioned, a lot of the topics from today's session are available in our Picture Perfect course. You can check out all of our training classes at 2020spaces.com/training. And what is a show without a show special? We've got great specials both on 2020 Design Live subscriptions as well as training options. If you have any questions, just ask us right in the chat. And I thank you so much for your time today. I hope you were able to learn a couple new things about 2020 Design Live and how to present better than anyone else.